Everybody, it's Ben with Red Barn. I'm here today to talk about epoxy pours. We're going to be doing some Ecopoxy pouring. Going to go through the basics from forms, the materials to use for your form, the wood itself, some of the prep that you want to do, and then measuring things out and pouring it. First, let's just start out with the form itself. It's super important to have your form completely sealed off. If you can see here on this form, I've got it taped and silicone caulking. The reason you put the taping in is so that you get a good release off of the epoxy. The reason that you're going to want to put in the silicone is so that you don't get any leakage. It's super important to have the silicone in there, just simply so you don't waste a ton of epoxy, because if this isn't sealed, if you don't have your form sealed, it is going to leak out. Guarantee, absolutely going to leak out, because the epoxy finds its way to all the holes and cracks, and you're never going to get this tight enough to keep that sealed in without the silicone. So make sure that you're sealing it with silicone. Any different, like kitchen grade or bathroom grade silicone is going to do the trick. Make sure you give it plenty of time to dry so that you don't get any leakage. The second part of that is the form itself. You're going to do a 3/4 inch melamine board. That's what I use. You tape it off with any type of HVAC tape. As you see here in the video, it's tuck tape, but Tyvek tape also works. You're just going to want to have that on there so that you get that nice pop out when your epoxy is cured. So you're going to make, just a simple box for it to go into. The bottom, the sides, everything is sealed off with your tuck tape and then your silicone. Once that form is ready, then we need to start talking about the wood itself. This particular piece is a nice walnut slab that I prepped. All the edging is cleared. As you see, all the live edge has been cleared of any bark, any debris, anything that's going to get in the way of the adhesion of that epoxy. You want full adhesion, so you don't want to sand this too high of a grit either. 100 really is about as low as you, or as high as you want to go. 100 is as high as you want to go with the sanding, so that you get good adhesion. Also, any areas that have holes or cracks, you're going to want to clean those out. Make sure you get any bark out of those, just because, once again, that's another spot that can create weakness where the epoxy doesn't completely adhere to the wood. So your wood has been prepped. You've cleaned it, it's leveled, it's sanded, so that you don't get all sorts of debris in there. Then it's time to start talking about measurements in volumes of epoxy. What's real nice about Ecopoxy, because the flow cast is a 2-to-1 ratio. On the green side, it shows if you want 9 liters, you're going to do 6 liters of the resin, 3 liters of the hardener, and it kind of measures it for you. All you have to do is figure out what you need, and that's a simple math equation of volume, cubic inches, and then convert it over to cubic inches to liters. So you take your length, width, and thickness, multiply that gives you your cubic inches, and then you just do the equation over to liters, which you can Google that. So this, for instance, this casting is 31 by 31, so 31 inches long. We take the average over here of this gap, which is 4.5 inches by 1.5 inches of thickness. That gives us 235 cubic inches. So once you figure out how much you need, then you can measure it out in your Ecopoxy bucket. So next, let's go ahead and work on measuring out the epoxy into the Ecopoxy bucket, and then we'll mix it up. All right, now it's time to mix up the epoxy. Like I said, the Ecopoxy buckets are real nice. They have the measurements out on them. We're doing the flow cast, so it's a 2-to-1 ratio. We need 9 liters for this particular pour, so we're going to start with the resin. So 6 liters of the resin, 3 liters of the hardener. Make sure you don't get any bad splash when you're doing this. So we're using a 12-liter kit right now, so each of the resin jugs holds 4 liters. So we've got 4 liters in there already. Now 2 more, and we are good for the hardener. Yahtzee. Make sure that you reseal the cap so that it doesn't start curing over time, because that'd be a shame. All right, now 2 liters of the hardener. I'm sorry, 3 liters of the hardener. All right, now you want to mix it for 2 minutes and then add color after that. So let's put her on the floor and use our Festool power mixer and get this mixed up. There it is. All right, so we mixed the epoxy for 2 minutes, and now it's time to put the color in. The reason you want to mix it for a solid 2 minutes before you do the color is so you do get a good solid mix. Now, color time. Today we're going to go with a bluish gray, midnight blue with whale, if you're wanting to replicate this. So a little bit of the pigment, not too much. A little bit goes a long way. And then the midnight metallic. I really want to get the marbling, so I'm going to do a decent amount of that. A little bit more. And then the whale, just to give some darkness and depth. I really like the way they complement each other. Then we'll remix until the color is nice and uniform throughout the epoxy. We are ready to pour, but one thing that's worth mentioning is we let the epoxy sit for at least 20 minutes. The pot time on this Flowcast is 8 hours, so you have enough time to let it sit. And the reason you want to do that is during the mixing process, you do work some air bubbles into the epoxy, so you want to let those rise up. It's going to make it so you don't have to torch this as much or heat gun it as much, whichever method you prefer. But we've got it mixed. It's ready to go. We're going to go ahead and pour this and see how this turns out. All right. Make sure you do a nice, slow, even pour so you don't run over your molds. And you don't push extra bubbles into the epoxy when you pour. And it's totally okay to let it run over. It's not going to hurt anything. Now, I personally like to pour extra just because you are going to get some shrink on big pours. If you're doing a smaller pour, you can be pretty exact with it. You're not going to get a lot of shrink in the epoxy. But as this starts to cure and heats up, you might shrink a little bit on a bigger pour. So I always like to run over just in case.